tonight's meetup, it's about Anthropic and their model Claude 2 that they've released the API. The model's been out there for a little while, and just this last week, I've got, this week, I've got access to their API. So that's what I was kind of trying to share what I've learned over this last, basically, day before yesterday and yesterday. I played with it a little bit and I kind of come up with this presentation. So let me share my screen. So basically, that's kind of like their website, anthropic.com, and their biggest model right now, it's Claude. It's a lot kind of simpler in the sense of OpenAI has a few models, right? Anthropic has only two of them right now. It's the original Claude 1, which I think right now they renamed it to Claude Instant. I'm not entirely sure if it's the version 2 that they use it, because I'll show you a little bit later. And then Claude 2, which is their latest. So if you're familiar with OpenAI, they have like the major models are the GPT 3.5 and the GPT 4, where the GPT 3.5, it's a lot faster but not as high quality in output, versus GPT 4 is their kind of highest quality, but it's a little slower. Pretty much, I've kind of noticed the same exact thing. Like their Claude Instant is very fast to output information, and it gives out quite a decent response. And then they have the Claude 2, which is their highest level kind of. I don't want to say that they're comparable with GPT 3.5 and GPT 4. Kind of like I haven't done a clear analysis. I've just kind of used it for my own purpose, and kind of like I'm going to share my conclusions from and kind of opinions on both, right? So this is their Claude AI. So you can go to just claude.ai and just kind of create an account. You can actually access the online chat like ChatGPT would, and that's quite useful. And then once you're able to get an actual access to the console, you basically have a little bit more stuff. This is pretty much like the ChatGPT. The only difference is that they have this API keys, which allows you to just kind of generate keys. And for now, you can create like a testing key. And this is what I've been using and just kind of playing with it. And they're allowing you to use it, seems like, for free. For development purposes, and the moment you're ready to actually deploy an app, you can actually get it, upgrade API keys to the paid version. So one of the things that I wanted to look at first, it's kind of price-wise. How does it kind of compare with OpenAI? So this is kind of like their pricing list, and they're just kind of giving it into million tokens rather than 1,000 tokens the way they're doing. So I did a little bit of math, and if you see here, I just compare them together. So OpenAI has the kind of like 4 models based on their context. So their most expensive, the GPT-4 with 32K tokens context, it's about 6 cents, 0.6 of a cent per 1,000 tokens. While Claude, it's at 0.011 of a cent. So it's kind of like, well, actually 1.1 cents, sorry. So this one is 6 cents and this is 1.1 cents. So it's almost 6 times cheaper to use Claude, right? And this is for the input tokens. Output tokens, if you look at their kind of highest model, it's 12 cents here versus 3 cents. So again, about 4 times cheaper for the output. And that makes a huge difference, especially when you're trying to deal with large amount of data, large amount of tokens that you would kind of throw at it, right? So this is kind of like the first thing that I kind of was looking at. The GPT 3.5, it's still cheaper than both in input and output, and it's kind of like a little bit more expensive than the Claude Instant. So that's why I was kind of saying, like, the GPT 3.5 is like Claude Instant, and then the Claude 2, it's like the GPT-4 basically. That's kind of like how they were looking at it. So that's kind of all about the pricing. So by the way, I didn't mention it at the beginning, but we're kind of, all our meetings are very informal, and I'm not looking at this as just a presentation. So if you guys have any questions, interrupt at any time. I would love to actually have a discussion, and it's more important that we're kind of clarifying everything, that all the questions that you guys have throughout the actual presentation, rather than wait for them for the end. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to stop me, interrupt, and just ask the question. So,
I have a question.
yes.
If you have an input that has about 2,000 words, is that going to likely to be 2K tokens?
So based on what they were mentioning, is that they were saying that 75,000 words are about 100,000 tokens. So I would say that the 2,000 words would be closer to 2,500 tokens, somewhere around there. If you kind of like, if you do the proportion, right? So does it make sense?
So if you do a full 100K Claude 2 input, looks like it'd be $1.10.
Right. You'll see it a little later, guys. I'm doing that.
Great.
I'm doing that.
Thank you.
Right. So, but yeah, good math. So that's pretty much it. It's just like they were saying that 75,000 words are roughly the equivalent of 100,000 tokens, or better said, 100,000 tokens are roughly the equivalent of 75,000 words. So that's kind of like what you can keep in mind. Right. So basically, they have, so we talked about mono pricing, and then they have quite a good documentation where they have guides on how to work with Claude, how to get access to it. And then one of the things that I thought it was very important, let me see, where was it? I'm still kind of like fighting around. Okay, so one of the things that I thought are more important is how they format their prompting. They're very adamant in having it with a prefix, that \n human colon, and then they want you to stop your prompt with \n assistant. That way the model knows that, hey, when he sees this human, it expects the question or the input. And then when he sees this, it understands that, hey, I need to return an answer to that. And they have kind of like this very simple type of formatting where you can have your question and you can use F strings or however you want to do it. This is JavaScript, but in Python, it's pretty much the same way, where you have an F string and you would pass your question through, right? So this is one thing that's a little bit different than OpenAI, and it works quite awesome. It's very simple to do it. And if you see that we'll talk about the library, they have a library that they've created. So this Anthropic SDK Python, that's actually allowing you to, where was it? They've created this human prompt and AI prompt that are part of the library. So all you have to do is import them and just kind of like pass them through, which I don't know, in a way, it kind of seems a little, a little too much work for just being able to put a little string here to just replace a string. But I thought it was kind of quite nice the way they've done it, right? So um, the one thing that's kind of big is that if you look at their API, they have only one endpoint. That's the completion API. And that completion API does pretty much everything you need it to do. You don't have to kind of like, you know how OpenAI has the completion API, has the editing API, has the chat API, translation API, everything is kind of like separated in a different endpoint. In here, you do all of them through this completion API. All you have to do is to make sure if you just care about completion, you pass your question, you get an answer back, and that's it, right? If you want to do a chat, you need to manage the history of the chat. So you just basically continuously add to the prompt. You would add its response after the assistant. Then you would start with another human, and you keep on add another question and keep on doing that. And this prompt string would just grow, keeping a history of all your discussion. So that way the model understands it, because every call it's stateless, so it would not have a history of what you asked before. That's why you
So,
need to make sure. Yes.
so does this make it? I mean, comparing between OpenAI and Claude, does this make it more expensive to run Claude because you have to now chain all your prompts, so your input token would be much
It's the
higher?
same thing. It's the same thing because OpenAI has the completion API that does just kind of like a one shot. You throw something at it, it responds back, right? And it has the chat option, but the chat option, all it does, it's actually chaining all these together for you.
Okay, okay.
So it's the same exact principle. In here, it's you do it. You have to think of it, and you have to pass it, and you have to build on your things, right? In for OpenAI, you would pass a messages dictionary basically, and you have the assistant, and I forgot the name, the user, I believe they were the kind of like the two of them, the way they have here, human and assistant, right? So in each one, it's kind of like an element in the dictionary, an item in the dictionary. So it's the same exact thing. And yes, whenever you use the chat, just to keep that history, every time you're paying for the model to actually reread through all the history of messages that you had in it, right? That's kind of like how these models work. So there is no way around that. Right.
Anton, did you have a chance to look into whether LangChain supports Claude? And
I haven't yet, but I am sure it does. I am pretty sure. It's yeah, I'm 99.9% sure it does. They're developing super quickly. They're just responding to everything, and I am sure that Anthropic gave them access way before they released it to other people, so they could actually get LangChain up and running and going. And I remember when I was kind of like Googling and looking or whatever on YouTube, I remember seeing a couple of titles talking about Claude and LangChain, but I didn't get to dig into it.
so where I'm going is the question is, if we were to use LangChain, would that make it, so we don't need to understand the nitty-gritties of Claude or OpenAI and just switch between the two as needed?
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
That's the biggest thing that LangChain does. It just basically separates the models from your code, so you're not learning how to use Anthropic's API or the Llamas, whoever hosts it, or OpenAI's or any of that stuff. So it's just it kind of hides all that behind itself. So yeah, the
Thank you.
moment you use LangChain, you can actually switch the models. And you just, whenever in LangChain, you're just kind of creating the model in the beginning, and you're just telling what model to use. and it handles it all for you. All you need is to pass the API key, which pretty much both OpenAI and Anthropic using the same format to read the keys. So it's very easy to just kind of have the keys read and accessible. So basically that's pretty much it. There's only one endpoint with a few parameters that are required. Model, it's the one that's kind of like the most important. And as I said, there are just two models. One is Claude 2, the other one is Claude Instant 1.2. And we'll look at that in the code. So that's that one. The prompt, and the prompt needs to be formatted like I was saying earlier, with the human and assistant at the end, the prefix and the suffix. Max token sample is basically the max number of samples that you want to generate back. So you can limit how many tokens the answer has, right? What I've noticed though is that if you kind of tell it, hey, write a story about something, and you put a very short max tokens to sample, it's not actually synthesizing that story to fit in that, but it just kind of, I think it comes up with a longer story, and the moment when it reaches the threshold, it just cuts it off. So it cuts off straight in the middle of the sentence. So that was kind of the part that I didn't necessarily like. So I'm just kind of like, for all my tests, I moved it to 1,000, so it just has enough to throw back, and everything worked fine. But again, that costs money. So in a production environment, it matters what you're doing. So it's kind of like, it's a good thing where you can actually limit the output. Again, stop sequences, you can change them. So you can add your own temperature, top E, top K, and all these are pretty much just like for OpenAI, where kind of like the temperature is the randomness. I don't remember exactly what the P was doing. Cumulative distribution of all the option. Okay, so it's just basically figures out the probability and uses kind of like a probability threshold, and only sample from the top K options. Okay, so this is based on the probability. This is based on the number of token that it has to choose from, right? So kind of like, and I didn't look at all at the metadata, so I'm not entirely sure. An object describe metadata about the request. Oh, maybe you can add user IDs, so that way you can actually keep, if you run multiple streams and multiple connections, you can probably use those. Yeah, that's an interesting thing. And stream is basically allowing you to receive the data kind of one by one. And I found a quirk with it that I'll kind of mention in the code. So basically, that's all there is. There's only one call. I think they have libraries for JavaScript, TypeScript, and Python. And you can also access it through curl, just kind of like a normal API endpoint, right? So any questions about this?
So it's a little cheaper, but is there a huge performance gain in certain areas by using cloud compared to GPT?
Well, that's kind of like, we're going to go through that. So one of the biggest reason you'd use it is the actual, what's it called, context. So in here, you can pass up to 100,000 tokens, so up to about 75,000 words of context. In GPT-4, that the maximum at the 32K, you can do whatever, 32K tokens. So it's a third of what you can do with Claude. So if you have huge amounts of data that you would kind of like for GPT, you would have to find ways to break that down. So if you have 100,000 characters or 100,000 tokens that you want to send to OpenAI, you would have to take the first 30%, send them, or whatever, 33%, send them, do a processing on it. Most likely, hey, if you want to extract data, you can say extract from this chunk and put it aside. Now send the next one, extract, put it aside, send the next one, extract, put it aside, which is fine because you can do that if you're extracting data. But if you're, for example, if you're trying to summarize that whole 100,000 token chunk of text, then you'll have to do a lot more calls with OpenAI because you'd send the first 33, get a summary, then you take the next one, get a summary, the next one, get a summary, and then you take these 3 summaries and send them back to OpenAI and create another final summary. So you have to do multiple processing to do that.
Right.
So this whole thing that I've described, it's built in LangChain. You can actually do it, just basically it can do it behind the scenes. You're not even aware that it does it. But the problem is that you're adding a lot of cost by doing it this way.
Yeah.
In here, also it's cheaper and it does a pretty darn good job. So that's kind of like the part that it's hard to evaluate unless you have a specific use case that you're trying it in ChatGPT or in GPT-4, and then you can try it in here in Claude. So that's why that's why I was kind of saying in the beginning, most of the stuff that I've done to show tonight, it's stuff that I've used OpenAI before. And because I used OpenAI, I kind of had an idea of what am I expecting and what problems I had with its responses. And I went to Claude and I was quite impressed because it performed in a way better for those specific and unique cases that I needed. So it's, yeah. I mean, OpenAI definitely, the GPT-4, if you need text generation and if you need to write a story, it's quite amazing. It just kind of fills it up. It's kind of like a lot of elevated words and a lot of just kind of literary prose that it outputs. Claude, on the other hand, it's kind of like a very dry text, more like almost like feels like technical text. So for stuff like that, it definitely I would use Claude. And kind of like for think about tutorials or think about you have a specific question about a like a programming thing, right? OpenAI is going to give you all this story and everything and just nice, it's great, but you're looking for a couple of nuggets. Claude, mostly from what I've seen, it's a lot closer to just giving you the nuggets without the fluff. So from that standpoint, I kind of liked it more. It's the text, it's a little bit more concise. So you don't have to waste that much time, right? At least that's how I saw it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So, and by the way, this is me playing with it for 2 days. I haven't done anything else kind of like more than these 2 days, right? So very simple. Pip install Anthropic to load the library. Once you got it installed, you just basically import Anthropic, and then this human prompt and AI prompt. And remember, those were just the those little prefix and suffix that you would actually put, the backslash n human and backslash n assistant, right? These are basically just me loading the key, and you're loading the API key in the Anthropic object, and from there you can just kind of keep on doing. And so, like I said, they have only one completion endpoint. So completion create, and you pass the model, you pass the maximum token samples and the prompt. this is example straight from them. So I just wanted to see kind of like the difference between the Claude Instant 1.2 and the Claude 2. And that's why I was saying that I think this Claude instance is still based on version 1 of Claude. So just because of that 1.2, but I am not 100% sure if that's correct or not. I couldn't find any kind of super detailed and super clear documentation and kind of history and all that. Truth be told, I haven't looked too much either, but couldn't find it for first glance. So very simple. You pass it, run the completion, and it's just outputs quite a good kind of like an understandable text. So the case starts in the lower federal court or state court system. But okay, if a party is not satisfied with the outcome of the lower court case, they can appeal to a higher court. This continues to multiple levels. For a federal case, appeals go through various levels of federal circuit courts. So you see, it's kind of like a very direct and very concise step-by-step to what's happening. This is the 1.2. Now, basically running the same exact question with 2, it gets a little bit more kind of like formatted and a little bit more verbose, right? So appeal from lower courts. Most cases come to the Supreme Court on appeal from lower federal courts or state Supreme Courts. Typically, a party who loses at the lower court level can appeal the decision to a higher court. So you see kind of like it's a little bit more kind of like elevated. This is like direct speech, you know. The case starts, blah, 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 you know, very kind of technical and dry in a way. But this one kind of like steps it up a notch, where it's a little bit more verbose and a little bit more kind of like nicer laid out and easier to read in a way. Then they have a streaming completion. So if you just kind of run this, you'll see differently from the other one is just outputting. And this is quite fast. I mean, did you see how quickly it just outputted? So this is with the 1.2. And if we do 2.0, where are you? Okay, Claude 2. It's a little bit slower, but it's pretty much, if you're kind of like used to watch GPT-4 in the chat GPT, it's kind of like pretty much the same speed. So speed-wise, it doesn't really bother me, you know. So they're both quite quick. And what I've noticed is that right now, if this completion.completion object that kind of keeps on being sent back, right? If I run that one by itself, it's empty. So basically what's happening is every time a new token or a new word is kind of sent back, a new response is sent back, this buffer gets cleared. So there is no way of just kind of like storing it. In here, if I run this, and if I run the completion.completion, so it's going to take a little while to do it. It's the same time. It's just here you looked at it while it was going, while there it's kind of slowly moving through. So 18.2 seconds. Let's see how much this one takes. So this one 18.6 seconds. So very similar. And if I do the completion, you have the whole text that kind of came through. While in here, while streaming, it just basically loses that information. So that's one thing to keep in mind, that unless you're storing it somehow, and this is what I've done here, just very simple Python, creating a string, and then I keep on add each response that comes back. So keep on adding, and then if I run this, let's move it to the top one. Now, if you're looking at this was going to have the full response, just like it was in the original one, right? So that's kind of like the main difference with the streaming, and it's kind of like a thing that it's just kind of like a gotcha to keep an eye for, right? Prompt formatting, remember I was kind of telling you about that one, and you have the human prompt with backslash and backslash and human, and the AI prompt, which is the same thing, the assistant, right? Another thing that they have, which is quite awesome, and it's extremely simple to use, is just basically counting the tokens that you're using with your prompts. So here I'm just kind of throwing this prompt, and I am doing a very quick Anthropic that counts tokens, and you pass the prompt. You pass the text, and it automatically figures out, hey, those were 19 tokens that were sent, and 345 tokens that were sent back. So basically, this is the 334 seconds, 345 tokens, right? The other thing, I was kind of playing with it. I'm like, hey, can it do translation like OpenAI does? Because in OpenAI, I've noticed at one point in time, I had to deal with text in basically it was Italian and English. And I'm like, okay, what if I take the Italian text, pass it, and the English text, pass them in the same input, in the same prompt, and say, hey, summarize them. Well, it's done quite an amazing job of summarizing both Italian and English text. It didn't care that it was different language, and gave me a beautiful summary in English. So I'm like, hey, can this one do translation? So I'm like, okay, let's try it. And it did it quite awesome. So if you hear that this is the translation that it returned, and this is the translation off of that specific paragraph. It's from Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. So it's just a small paragraph. And it's very, very close. This is a little bit more poetic, while here, kind of a little bit not as nicely spoken. You can see that it's a little bit more rough in the way that it outputs the text and just kind of the meaning. But it's doing a great job at doing it. So here's another thing that I can do. I don't have a chunk of English because I was curious if I could. Oh, I don't know where I got this. What I wanted to try was to pass both the French and the English and see. Or no, okay. Let's do a summarization of this text. I'm curious. I haven't tried it to do. So it did a little bit. It did a summary. The year that no one has likely forgotten, without mentioning rumors, leaving aside the rumors. Skip as a master from Europe and America. Well, it's not necessarily a summary. I'm just playing right now, so bear with me. It's funny now it returned it as a French, right? So it's still kind of like it does a good job, and it's kind of interesting that the previous summary was in English and this one it's in French. So there's still kind of quirks. You're meant to expect different behaviors every time, right? So, but this is pretty cool. And it makes sense what it actually said. So, Now it. Okay, so this, it needed a little bit more kind of playing with the prompt to give the proper answer, right? So it's doing pretty good at translation, examples, and everything. And then the other one that I wanted to kind of look at is data extraction. I've been using OpenAI for data extraction, and I found that it has a very hard time to extract physical addresses, street addresses from large amounts of HTML. So if I have an HTML web page that has an address on it, I could barely get anything that makes sense out of OpenAI, right? So that was kind of like one of those things where I wasn't happy with the answers. And here, without much kind of like prompt engineering or any of that stuff, I just basically said, can you extract the street addresses found in the following HTML file? Return a bulleted list with each address as a bullet point. And it found 3 addresses, and it's done quite an amazing job of separating them, because what's happening in HTML, you have these addresses on a couple of rows, or they're in some sort of a div that has a break space in between, or they use them as the first part of it, it's in a, let's say, a table in one cell, and the other part, it's in another cell. So they're all over the place, right? So I've tried it with quite a few pages that I kind of tried that I knew they had addresses on, and it extracted it. It's done an awesome job 95+% of the time. So still not perfect, but it did a really good job at extracting the data as kind of like I was expecting. So, and again, with a minimal prompt. OpenAI, I'm noticing more and more that you have to really try to create a pretty huge prompt that forces everything in what you need. And even with that, it will still kind of throw something out and just kind of like give you a wrong answer completely out of the blue, completely unexpected. I haven't done too much with this. I mean, these are like what, 4 or 5 examples that I've done to extract the addresses versus OpenAI, where I ran it over a few hundreds. So it's still kind of like, I'm still curious to see how just kind of consistent each processing is when you have a lot of data that you're throwing at it. So I haven't tested that, but it's kind of like a one-shot things. It's doing pretty awesome, right? So it just kind of returned those. One thing that kind of like I wanted to do, because let me see, I have it open here, right? So just let me find it for a second. I was in a previous presentation. Where are you? I think it's the OpenAI exploration. Sorry. Give me a second. No, it's... I don't know where it was. Let me see. Let me try to find this. Right here. Okay. So for OpenAI, I showed this when we did the functions calling presentation, when I was kind of trying to extract data from unstructured text. So basically, I wanted to extract from here, I just wanted a dictionary that returns the company name, the position, the year they started, the year where they basically left, or if they're still there, it's 2023, and a job description. So these are pieces of information that I wanted to extract from a resume, right? So from a chunk of a resume. And for OpenAI, in order to get that in a consistent manner, you have to use a function, right? So you have to write all this big function and explain what fields do you want, the description for each field, what type of answer you're expecting back. It's a string, it's an array, whatever. And then just basically this whole function gets sent to OpenAI together with your process when you make the call. So here you see that's just basically function call. It's auto because it's I'm passing more functions into one call, and OpenAI makes the choice of which one to use. So depending on what my prompt is, right? So pretty much I wanted to see if it's able to do the same thing without the function calling. And I've done this, and I had to do a little bit more kind of like prompt engineering in a way, if you want. So I'm saying here to extract the professional experience from the following text. And I'm passing this chunk of text here from a resume. And I'm saying return a dictionary with the following keys and values extracted from the text. Company name, position, year start, year end, and position description, job hours, job location. These are extra because I wanted to try to see just if it returns none the way it's supposed to. So I'm giving it notes. If still in the position, it's still in the position for the year end. So here, it's still in the position, return to 2023 for year end. And if you cannot find the information, return none, right? And I said, make sure you return just the JSON, no other extra words. Very simple, very clear. And this was the answer. Figure it out that the year end, even though it's, what was it? Present, right? It figured out that it's present, so it should put 2023. You respected that. Couldn't find job hours anywhere, so it returned none. The only thing, well, actually, this one did even a better job because it returned the fashion company. It found it from here, while OpenAI, if I remember correctly, what did it return? The fashion company, New York, New York, right? So it also added kind of the location to it because that's how it was in the text. Where are you? Here. So in a way, it actually did a little better by being able to figure out that, hey, this is the location, and then pass the location as well, right? So any questions up until now? No? I guess we can keep on going.
I like that example because I've done something with JSON and GPT. So this is neat.
Right, I had to do that quite a lot, and I was using the functions, which do a lot better when you're talking about kind of like structure output. But it's still, even with those, it's still kind of sometimes adds it, sometimes doesn't add it, sometimes even though I say required, the ones that have none are missing. So it's kind of inconsistent. Again, this is like a one shot that I've done here. I don't know exactly how consistent would be over 100 different resumes that you throw at it, but it's at least kind of like first impression. It's pretty darn good at what it's doing, right? So another example that I had here from previous OpenAI interactions was to just kind of pass it where return the same answer, but in different kind of versions, right? So multiple personalities disorder type thing. So here I'm like, I need to generate 3 different responses to a question as follows: a sassy and sarcastic version, a happy and useful version, and helpful version, a happy and helpful version of the response. Okay, here, but this second one had to be translated to French, And then the last one, just kind of like happy and helpful. So kind of like the normal one. And the question is, it's safe to drink water from a dehumidifier? And sassy and sarcastic, well, let me think. A device that collects moisture from the air and dumps it into a bucket just screams refreshing beverage to me. So definitely it's sarcastic, right? The second one, it's in French, and it's pretty much a translation of the English version, the helpful English version, right? So it's doing pretty well at doing that, right? And I guess here I was showing the difference between this is the normal way and this is, oh no, this is Claude 1.2. This was Claude 1.2 that replied it. And it's still, I would have thought it's 1.2 until I actually see, I was kind of like, why do I have the same code twice? But yes, so it's pretty darn good. And if you run it with Claude 2, the same thing. It's just, well, if you're really dying for a sip of that delicious dehumidified water, be my guest. So again, you know, very sarcastic, and it's doing a really good job at doing 3 answers, separating them, and giving you pretty much what you need, right? This one was another question that it was part of that. Let me see. Right. So this one was kind of like the problem was, how do you generate, you have a question, how do I install TensorFlow for my GPU? And it's basically you want it to give you a list of terminal commands, strings to be executed. So almost like a bash script. So this one did pretty good, and it just kind of like comes up with just 2. Now, I am not sure either one is correct. I haven't tried to install TensorFlow with CUDA in a long while. So I'm not sure if it's that easy, the way OpenAI says, or that hard as Claude is doing. Because Claude, and actually Claude went all the way to the beginning where it asks you to do an update, then you install Python 3, Python pip, and all these things. And then finally, you just kind of add the drivers for the kind of like the repository for the graphic drivers, and then update them, and finally install the NVIDIA driver. I'm not sure why you would need to install that driver if you already have the card. Then reboot the whole machine. Not necessarily think this is useful, but NVIDIA SMI, it's a really good thing to have. And then finally gets to the install TensorFlow GPU, and then verifies the installation. So it's a lot more kind of thorough in its answer. Now, I have no idea if this is correct or not. So, and the other thing that I kind of didn't like was that I was saying generate just a list of terminal commands, but it actually went in and added a ton of verbose stuff. So I'm like, okay, how about we just say generate a bash script? And it did quite an awesome job just generating the script. And this one, it's actually smaller than what they were giving, what it was giving here, or it just seems to be. Yeah, it doesn't install the NVIDIA driver, and it doesn't seem to add, it doesn't add the repo for the drivers here. So it's kind of like a little bit different, but it's pretty awesome and pretty useful. Now, how correct it is, that's just kind of something that needs to be tried. But it's a pretty good, does a pretty good output on things like that. And the other good thing about this is that it's training, it's up until 2023. I'm not sure exactly when in 2023, but it definitely has a couple more years on top of GPT, of kind of like data from the internet. So it's more up to speed data. Now, I just wanted to kind of go crazy. So, but before that, do you guys have any questions until now? Nothing?
Real quick on the instructions for the tensor, the other functional stuff.
Uh-huh.
What was the TensorFlow thing it was trying to install?
Well, basically I
No,
said,
not the one here, in the other one. Yeah, this one here.
this one.
I just wanted to see if this even exists. TensorFlow CUDA latest. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
So
yeah.
right, and this one, I'm not sure.
Those other ones looked all right. I mean, I've installed TensorFlow plenty of times, and that's, pretty much what you do. No. Okay, I'm done.
Correct. Yeah, so, and this one is GPT-4, that output is that. Oh, well, so one more point for Claude. Okay, so now this is the actual fun part. I'm not sure if this is going to work, but whatever. So I worked on this website probably 4 or 5 years ago, and I have a pretty gnarly 10,000 lines of code, functions.php. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with WordPress development, but you can add theme functionality and almost kind of like plug-in like functionality to this one file in the theme, right? And this thing, it's a beast. It's like 10,000 lines of code that are just quite gnarly. A lot, it's repetitive, nothing necessarily yeah, it was just like a lot of work that happened really fast, and we never really refactored it. But I had a ton of code in there, so I'm like, let me throw it at it. So there it is. Just copy paste it in here. Went crazy with it, and I should move faster because it's long. So I had to cut out some from the end just to be able to fit in the context, right? So I'm right at about 99,000 tokens. And like you said, David, 1.09. So it's right there. So that's one kind of thing to keep in mind. That just kind of, especially when you deal with huge stuff like this, and when if you're trying to chat over this large chunk of code, you're continuously, at every call, you're paying that $1. So this can add up really quick. But I'm like, okay, let's see. What would you do to optimize the following PHP code? Can you rewrite it better? So it just went in and kind of read through all of it, took forever. So 1 minute and 17 seconds to just kind of go through this. And just kind of like started giving me points on what should I do, right? Change the posts to posts. Cache repetitive expensive calls, right? Like the get out or meta, do it once, you don't have to do it over and over and over. Optimize the queries. Yeah, these are not necessarily optimized. Remove unused code and variables. There is a ton of stuff like that, just due to the amount of the speed and the amount of work that needed to be done at that point in time. And use output buffering for any HTML output to avoid multiple calls. I'm not entirely sure what that is. So load CSS JavaScript efficiently. Well, yes and no. I kind of get that, but this is not a problem. Use Ajax for updating. Yes, sometimes I'm just reloading the whole page. And kind of like all these little things, right, that it came up with, which was pretty awesome. And then it gives me an example of how to optimize one of the functions. Timothy leaderboard, and just goes through this, right? So this is another thing that I've also done with GPT. Actually, ChatGPT I've done it in, where I had a function that was working through about 20,000 rows into a data frame, and I didn't do a merge, I didn't do any of that stuff. All I was doing was an apply to pull data from other data frames. And it was taking like 30, 40 seconds to do it, right? So it was just first time I did the function. I didn't want to spend the time to actually do any of the optimization at that point in time. All I did was make sure that it runs. Then I grabbed it, put it in ChatGPT. I'm like, hey, can you use merge? Can you rewrite this function to actually be optimized and fast? Took that same function, but paste it back in my code, and I'm like, I don't know, 4 or 5 milliseconds. So it's this. I mean, these tools are amazing for programming, just like mind-boggling, and especially having this large context that you can have with Claude. It's amazing because right now, yes, I pasted all that in there, but let's say if you have a bug that you cannot find, you can try it. I mean, Jay, probably you could actually play with it and see if it kind of helps you in any way, shape, or form. You know?
Yeah, the context length is a big.
Yeah.
I run into that limit a lot. So yeah,
exactly.
nice.
Exactly. And when I was kind of showing you guys about the address, when it was extracting the address, that was another thing that I was hitting with OpenAI. I had to always break it down and try to extract it in pieces with OpenAI because it was always above the limit of characters. These ones, I'll go to that more towards the end, but in here, for when I was doing that extraction, I was at 30 to 40,000 tokens per that web page. So that makes a lot of sense to use it directly. Not necessarily cost-wise. So there can be some optimization where you extract just the text and you don't pass all the JavaScript, you don't pass all the HTML tags, you don't pass any of that. So you reduce your text from 30,000 tokens, 40,000 tokens to maybe 5 to 10,000. So, but I just wanted to throw something at it, see how it handles. That was my only purpose. That was pretty much it. So here's done quite an awesome job, kind of going back to this one, at showing me a function. I can find the actual function and we can compare it if you guys want. So here, say there's a lot bigger function that, yeah, I will need to understand what I've done here. This is code from so far behind. But at least you can see that we're talking about 40 some lines of code versus this function actually, no, this actually oh, here, this is the rest of the function to display. So we just use the cache part. Okay, so this is how it's kind of like to cache the query. So it doesn't have, so it makes it faster. Yeah, so it does quite awesome things, right? So, and then I just basically took one specific function, right? This TeamOK bent orders page, and just asked it to kind of go through and give me thoughts on it. So, which actually it's pretty good, and these are good suggestions to improve, right? So yeah, this is a faster way to reload stuff. So, but I mean, it's quite useful information to be able to actually, and especially, let's say if it's not your code, right? If you want to understand some things really quickly, you can just take a few functions, throw them at them, at these models, and you get information back, right? And then the last thing I wanted to do was just to kind of create like a PHP doc. PHP doc is the equivalent of doc strings in Python, right? So description of the function and everything. And I pass the function, and it's pretty spot on to what it does. So it's very, very useful in kind of programming and development and stuff. So and that's pretty much what I have. So
Anton, a question for you.
yes.
So, in typical production environments, one is very conscious about cost of transaction. So one
Yes.
were to deploy, let's say we were to deploy, some kind of a chat interface for customer service. So you would be budgeting, you would have a budgetary cost per transaction or per conversation. Is there any way to get either in terms of number of tokens input and output or the cost itself,
Yes.
an estimate before we actually execute?
Yeah, yes. Actually, definitely before you execute, because, well, for the input, for the output, you can limit it. So let me see, where do I have the code?
Yeah, I understand the part about, limiting it as part of the prompt or, max
Right.
tokens. Max
So-
tokens, you said it will get truncated, kind of.
Right. So you cannot figure out how many tokens it's gonna send back to you because you don't know what it's gonna come up with, right? You can estimate roughly if it's a yes or no type of question, or if the question is write me an essay of 1,500 words,
Right. So that way you can limit it. The prompt can, you
Yes,
can in the prompt limit it. That I understand.
Exactly. For input, you can take any piece of text. So here, if you look to input tokens, where is the input tokens? Here, right? So here, I'm just loading this HTML page into this HTML variable, right? And now I have this big chunk. And the first thing I do before calling anything below, I am printing the input tokens. So I know that I have 13,000, 11, and 15 tokens, right? So, and you can actually basically put here an if, what did I do? Sorry. Here, you can say if, I just ran it.
I understand we can do it on the input token. So you can,
Right.
My question was, does either Anthropic or OpenAI, give us a guess estimate, maybe not the perfect estimate, on what the output token style length will be? How many
Not will be, but was. They give it to you after.
Yeah, I mean, if you are budgeting, you want it before the fact, right?
Right. Yeah, no, there is no way to know. I mean, you can say here in the prompt, and I've kind of done that one with OpenAI from other kind of purposes. You can say that, hey, I need a summary that's no more than 100 words. And it's
I guess that I understand. Okay, got it. Okay.
Right. So you can do it that way, but you cannot kind of figure it out what the model will output. What's the length of what the model will output? So yeah.
Got it.
But yeah, so I mean, it's very simple and straightforward. Sometimes, because you guys were asking earlier about LangChain. Sometimes I feel LangChain would actually add too much overhead to this if you're just using it. So it has other amazing uses where if you have more complex stuff where you kind of do agents and chat and all that functionality, but just to do simple kind of like day-to-day programming things, like data extraction, just analysis of certain things, it would be overkill to use LangChain. So,
Anton, do you need to submit a business request to get a Cloud 2 right now?
yes, so that's what I was saying in the beginning. I've been the same thing with OpenAI. Before they open it to everybody, or I don't even know. Jay, did you get yours?
For which one?
For OpenAI.
I've never gotten anything from
You
it
still haven't got it.
that I've been in a waiting list for. I just get access to it when everybody else does. So
Right. So I mean,
And
I've
I've-
applied pretty much the same time with Jay, and I got my access to OpenAI long time ago, really, really long time ago. And this one, I think, over the last couple of months, I've been applying. Kind of like I probably sent like 3 or 4 different requests, and finally on Monday I got the access, and I'm like, oh, perfect timing because I didn't know what to do for the meetup. So I'm like, okay, great. Here is the thing.
Got it. Got it.
And,
And do you do they tell you when they'll have fine tuning available?
No, they didn't say anything about that one. I haven't read anything about fine tuning or anything. This is just their first opening for just kind of usage.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah, no
You're
worries.
talking about Claude 2, right? You're not talking about Claude, instance.
You can use the console, not the console, the basically the chat.
Oh, okay.
Right, if you create an account here, you can use it, but you
So it's
cannot
an
use the
API.
API.
Got it. Got it.
Right. So this is just for the API, basically to give you access to the API keys. That's all.
Got it.
So, and but I'm just kind of like, I'm using these models more and more programmatically. I have little tasks that kind of data extraction and some other little things that writing regex, not fun. And yes, you can write regex to get an email address, you can write regex to get a phone number, but it's a lot easier to just let them do it. I mean, and especially for stuff like an address. That address, good luck extracting it, right? Or like the information from the resume that I was showing at the end, the same way. Just good luck trying to find all the possible ways somebody thought to write in the resume their job description and everything else, So yeah, that's why I like using them quite a lot. So, man, no, I've been quite impressed with speed and just the ability to actually not necessarily crash. I haven't had any times. I mean, a lot of people were complaining about Claude that remember how OpenAI was doing it too. It starts generating and then it stops, and you need to tell it, hey, continue. Oh, and then kind of like basically remembers and keeps on going, right? I haven't seen any of that happening. And I was expecting it to throw some sort of an error or something when I was throwing these the huge chunk of code here, this 100,000 tokens. No, still ran pretty flawlessly. So yeah, so I'm really impressed by it, and I'm gonna use it more and more. Just kind of like and compare it. And I've tried to kind of side by side to just put the same prompt in OpenAI and in Claude in the UI in the chat, and the answers were, like I said, if you want kind of literary stuff, definitely GPT-4 unbeatable. But if you want more technical and more direct stuff, I really like Claude more to a certain point. It's more on point and more direct. So, yeah. And being cheaper, it's a lot better too,
So have you had an occasion to compare, let's say, a code output, something that is, very comparable between the two?
Okay, I've tried to, if you guys have an idea, I've tried to come up with some sort of a, hey, create a prompt to generate an app in both of them. And I'm like, I drew a blank, basically. So, but if you guys have an idea, we can try something now. So, let's see. What can we do? Create. You know what I've done before? I've used Streamlit to basically create like a UI interface for a data frame or for data, but I'm thinking about just the data frame. Okay, Streamlit app to generate an UI, or let's say GUI to be more specific, for displaying the data frame and allowing you to edit the data in the data frame. So very simple, very direct. So let's see what it does. And meanwhile, let me open up ChatGPT. So let's see, let's just kind of, what did I do? Oh, here, okay. So, well, see, this didn't fully understand it. So it's creating the UI with the ST title and then displays the data frame. Then creates, oh, so it then basically creates two text input fields where you can actually use them to do the data frame. This works. That's a very simple, clean way of doing it. But the only problem is that they have a edit data frame functionality that allows you to actually see the whole data frame and you can double click in it. So, but this works. On the other hand, what is this one doing? So it just creates the data, creates a data frame, generates a link to download given object to download. I'm not entirely sure why is it downloading? Set the generator for display data frame, allowing you to edit the data in the data frame. Okay. Here's the title. Writes the DF rather than using the data frame that ST already has. So write in Streamlit, it allows you to output any kind of information that you want. You can write an image, you can write a data frame, you can write anything, but they have this specific method for data frames only. So they're kind of using, maybe because the information that it has, it's older, and maybe data frame it's newer, so probably that's why. And then it creates a button that just kind of using the values in the columns. And then it does the whole edited data in here, and then builds the data frame again. So, I mean, I think this would do too, but it's a lot more complex, you know, than this one. So if I would have the choice to go between these two pieces of code, I would definitely start with this one and figure out how it does. Let me see.
Check it out on Bard.
Sorry.
I was just kidding. You know, I was saying maybe we should check it out with Bard.
No, I've tried. I've tried Bard and nothing.
Yeah.
What? Okay, what the heck? Okay, oh, I should have on the docs. Yeah, frame data editor here is this one. Let's see, maybe it's aware of it. Oh, it's data frame. I'm curious to see what it does. Way more interactive. Here's a look. Okay, so this is a lot more
shorter.
clear,
Okay.
you know.
Right.
So it's a very simple. It's a very simple thing. So it did better. Let's see if we can pass the same exact thing here. Yeah, okay, so back then it was experimental data editor. It still wants to use this download link, right? But okay. And it's still using the data frame. So where did you use this experimental data editor? Edited DF. Okay, so it uses this, and then it's using this to display the data frame. Okay, so it's using this just as a container to be displayed in there. I don't know. I don't know exactly how this works.
Yeah. So this is where most organizations, businesses would have problem because there's so much option available now.
Yes.
You know, and yeah, the decision making will have to be use case based. And
right.
Of course, you know, nobody would really want to deploy multiple, you know. So
right.
This is the question that many businesses are going to, you know, have to answer, and they are going to probably, you know, delay their deployment because
right. Well, I think one of the biggest things is use case. Once you know your use case, you're able to figure out which model would do better. And that's one way. The other thing is, like, I got a question earlier about fine-tuning. OpenAI, you can take any of these models and fine-tune it for your exact case. You can just basically train it specifically for your unique case that you want. And I am pretty sure that if I take 1,000 addresses and take a model, fine-tuning on those 1,000 addresses, kind of like big chunks of text, a big chunk of HTML, or maybe not 1,000, maybe you can definitely find 10,000 somehow. Maybe you can use Claude to extract the addresses and figure out where they are in the HTML, and you pass that on as training data to OpenAI. So you can use the strengths of one to help train the other, and then create your own unique fine-tuned model that would extract the addresses and output exactly how you want it. That's something that you can do with OpenAI that currently doesn't seem to be an option with Claude. I haven't seen it in the API, so I would say it's not available for now. So I mean, that's where kind of like companies need to figure out what they actually need first, and based on that, to apply a model. But what I'm seeing is that everybody's expecting these models to be oh, I'm going to pay $20 a month and I'm going to replace a $50,000 or $100,000 a year employee, right? It doesn't work that way, you know?
That's I mean, I don't think they're jumping that gun as such, but they're definitely confused, because
Yes.
not only is there a ton of stuff available, there's all this marketing going on, and
Right.
there are so many new versions coming in fairly fast. So
Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
so today you might choose to go with Claude, and tomorrow GPT comes with GPT-5.
Right.
That's where
it's-
LangChain is going to make a difference, especially if you're going to put some kind of an internal interface.
Right. What I'm more excited about, it's about Llama, and Llama 2, and kind of like the open source community. That's the one that I think in the end will have the advantage with a lot of these models. And the Hugging Face, the marketplace, is quite amazing because, I mean, there's certain unique cases that you can do with Anthropic and GPT-4 that they're kind of overlapping. But when you're dealing with images, well, now GPT-4 or ChatGPT allows you to pass images to it as well.
Right,
so that's kind of like an awesome thing that kind of keeps on moving along. But before that, you could use any other kind of models that you can find on Hugging Face. And it's an industry and a market that it's booming right now. And this whole year, beginning of the year versus now, we're just, oh my God, humongous difference. And I think it's just going to accelerate because it's so much easier to write more code using these tools to debug. I mean, you're so much faster. You write something like I was telling earlier about that function. I didn't want to deal with merges and I didn't want to deal with any kind of like SQL thinking. But I'm like, okay, just run a loop, simple loop, run and apply, be done. Yes, it takes longer, but this is just what I needed for now. Copy paste in GPT-4 in ChatGPT, and then tell it, hey, I need this optimized. I got it back, optimized, done. It makes your life so much easier, So,
Hey, guys, I gotta run. This
Okay.
was fantastic session. I really
Thank
appreciate it.
you. Thank you, Roman. So,
Yes, thank you for this. This was good.
well, very
Yep.
welcome.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No?
I look forward to see what we come up with for our next meeting.
Well, I need some help. So, because I had the option to present this and the other stuff that I wanted to show a little bit, I've done some research into kind of like data science, clustering, and statistical analysis in a way stuff. Are you guys interested in anything like that? Or should we stick to AI?
I'd be interested in the statistical analysis part of it.
Okay.
Okay,
I-
but I don't know what it is. I mean, it's a
just
analysis is a
basic-
big word.
very simple, like mean, median, whatever mode, and then do a little bit of kind of standard deviation and kind of like basically how to use it with some time series and how to make it a little bit better to figure out outliers. So that's kind of a way to deal with it. I mean,
What
that's
data
what I have.
store? What data store would you use?
I would not use any of that. I mean, this would be based on a data set that I have locally.
Okay, because I went to Node.js's the graph databases data
Yes.
science class, and once you get the data in there, they're kind of thing that's kind of like a notebook type interface for accessing their thing.
Yes.
Has a lot of built-in functionality to explore your data.
Right. I've dealt with graph databases before. They're pretty awesome. I just, yeah, I mean, I didn't necessarily have a use for them at this point in time. This is more like I have a ton of time series, and I'm just kind of looking through, finding outliers that just, that's one of the cases. And I mean, different types of kind of finding outliers, finding missing data, finding a few of these other things in a time series. That was the part that I was thinking about doing. So if I don't find anything else that's more interesting, like AI related, I'm gonna kind of retort to that.
Okay.
So it's more dry statistical stuff.
Sounds good.
But the question that I would have for you, Anton, related to that is, you know, can we feed some data into, you know, any of these models and ask questions of it directly without us doing the analysis?
Yes. So especially
maybe we can do it later. I got to jump. So
yeah, yes, you can. Yes, you can. But
okay.
it's not worth.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Appreciate the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah, so kind of like to continue what I wanted to say is that, especially for time series, finding outliers and all these things, you can definitely do it mathematically a lot faster and a lot cheaper, right? Because you don't have to send data to an OpenAI model or any other model to kind of try to figure that one out. And I mean, these models are great for unstructured data more than structured data. And when you have structured data and clear algorithms, you're way better off by doing it mathematically, you know, statistically. So at least that's my opinion. Yeah. Any other questions?
So maybe when you do that, also do an example of having the chat bot do that analysis on a
yeah,
subset
we
of
can
these.
go. That would be cool. That would be cool. I can think of that. Yes.
So
Cool.
maybe give it the generic question of, you are an expert data scientist. What would you do to prepare this data?
Right, right. And I mean, I am sure both of them will do pretty decent. I know OpenAI will do quite awesome because they have that model that's actually trained specifically to do data analysis. So, so they have part of the UI. So
you could also ask it, give me a Python program that would do this data analysis.
oh yes. Well, I actually had a problem. I was actually having fun with this with Jay, talking to him. I was quite frustrated at the point because I wanted it to extract the data, right? So I would give it a chunk of text and I say, hey, extract this data from this chunk of text. And the answer would come up with, oh yes, great. In order to do this, you can use Python. And you can use Python like this. And it was writing me the code. And I'm like, no, I don't want the code to extract it. I want you to do the extraction part. So that was quite frustrating and funny in a way.
You can, in GPT-4, you can turn on where it writes the Python code and then runs it for you.
Right, right. Yes. So, yeah.
Interesting.
That's pretty cool. They're moving ahead quite fast, So.
Yes.
So. Okay, guys. Well, thank you so much. And we'll see you in two weeks. No, let me see. It's 19, so it's the 1st. Yeah, on the 2nd. So November 2nd. That's going to be our next meetup. That's 2 weeks from now. So.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Anton. Bye.
Thank you, guys. Bye.